For a Scream movie that's been advertised to have more balls than any of the other Scream movies prior to it, in reality, while you're watching it, it actually feels like it's playing it safe more times than not. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Hello?
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Scream 6 follows the surviving 4 members of the previous Ghostface rampage, as they try to leave their troubles behind in Woodsboro and relocate to New York City. However, soon they find themselves in a fight for their lives, sort of, when a new Ghostface killer surfaces. Truth be told, this movie actually starts out in the most unconventional way, so much so that I remember thinking to myself that maybe they are actually trying to do something different and exciting with this movie, because I had never seen a Scream movie start in the way that this movie starts, and that was momentarily refreshing to me.
Just give me a chance. I know there's a lot riding on it, but it's all psychological.
Unfortunately, just as quickly as I was trying to talk myself into this movie, it was all undone by them using that moment to simply subvert my expectations in the worst way possible. We're talking Rian Johnson's Last Jedi style of subverting expectations. In fact, I'm starting to think, after watching the last 2 Scream movies, that Rian Johnson might be secretly part of the Radio Silence team. Right away, Scream 6 is operating under the assumption that we actually care about the story of Tara and Sam, and that we are very much on board with those characters carrying the franchise moving forward. Now, some people may be invested in their story and may even like them. I can't say that I'm 100% sold, though, because every time Tara and Sam are on screen, it just reaffirms to me and reminds me that there is a giant Sidney Prescott-shaped hole in this movie. And no, Mindy proclaiming that legacy characters no longer matter this deep in a franchise is going to change that.
Don't f with the original.
Like it or not, Sidney is Scream and Scream is Sidney. They are synonymous with each other and they always will be. And to me, they just haven't done enough with Sam and Tara after only 2 movies to make me care about them as characters in the way that I already care about Sidney. Granted, after watching this movie, I am glad that Sidney Prescott is not involved. I shudder to think what they would do with her character, considering how some of the other legacy characters have been treated. So it's probably better off that she's not involved, because honestly, I think she's better than the content that they are currently putting out in this franchise.
That makes sense.
But when it comes to Sam and Tara, I simply do not care that Sam is feeling overwhelmed living in the shadow of her serial killer father. And yes, the Billy Loomis visions from Scream 5 do return. You would have think they would have taken this opportunity to remove one of the most universally disliked parts of that movie, but no, they actually double down on the ridiculousness. Because you know, you don't want to give in to those pesky fans with valid criticisms. It's much easier to just call them toxic.
Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
I also don't care that Tara feels smothered by her overprotective sister. And this is her whole arc throughout this movie, if you want to call it that. The melodrama between them exists because Tara does not want to live in the past. She wants to move on with her life, and she feels like Sam is holding her back from doing that. And this whole dynamic between them is resolved, but it's resolved in the most laughable and overt way possible. Basically slapping the audience across the face with the message behind their relationship.
Message!
As for the other 2 in the core 4, yes, that's what they're calling themselves, nothing has really changed for the Meeks twins either. Chad is pretty one-dimensional and doesn't really have much to offer outside of cringe-inducing romantic dialogue directed towards Tara. Mindy's whole character seems to consist of her being a lesbian and just spouting off Twitter buzzwords as she desperately tries to establish herself as the new Randy Meeks. Yes, queen! Mindy does answer my question in regards to what trend in horror Scream 6 would be tackling in its overall message this time around. Because as I stated in my Scream 5 review, not much time has passed since the last movie, so it's not like we have a new horror trend that we can now deconstruct. But the answer to that question is the most uninspired one possible. Because now it's all about franchises. Kinda confused what we've been doing up until this point, Mindy.
I don't get it.
Franchises is a very broad topic, but I guess this is what happens when we start reaching for material and we don't allow enough time for new horror trends to take shape. This movie also features the very underwhelming return of fan favorite character Kirby, rocking a terrible wig and a laughable backstory, and a personality that doesn't really match the character that I remember seeing in Scream 4. Basically, like Scream itself, she is Kirby in name only. They completely underutilized her character to the surprise of no one, because the writers of this movie clearly do not care about these legacy characters as much as they're leading on.
I don't care!
I would talk more about Gail, the only one of the original three that is actually in this movie, but honestly, there really isn't much to talk about. The only thing they really did was undo her character development she had in Scream 5 after Dewey died, and turned her right back into the cold-hearted character that is just looking to profit off of tragedy.
Why are you the way that you are?
Next, I'm going to talk about the horror aspects of this movie, or lack thereof. All the hype around this movie was built around the brutality of its kills. But honestly, while watching it, none of the kills were anything I haven't seen before. The only difference being, this time, in Scream 6, they actually had less meaning. I felt little to no tension during any of these kill scenes. And that's due mostly to the fact that they are pretty predictable. It's made very clear early in this movie who the expendable characters are. So therefore, those kills feel empty when they occur.
I don't give
Actually, Scream used to do a good job of making you feel like any character could die at any moment. On the flip side of this equation, the more notable characters who are supposed to be expendable according to the new rules all have some very notable and very obvious plot armor. In fact, there's 3 instances in this movie where characters very clearly should have died, but didn't. Thus, we have our first Scream movie that is scared to commit to its own rules that it's established.
S-O-F capital T. Soft. Huh?
When one of the characters in particular is said to be pulling through, I physically rolled my eyes in the theater because the way it was set up, there's no way in hell that should have ever happened. This movie doesn't take nearly as many chances as everyone would have you believe. It actually plays things very safe, distracting you with a shotgun-wielding ghost face, so you don't realize that you've actually seen everything in this movie before. This is not a game changer. It feels like the death of legacy horror. And to that, I honestly say good riddance.
Jesus Christ, it's about time!
Now, I have to reiterate this because there is no spoilers in this video, but I have to vaguely discuss the finale of this movie, because finales are such a huge part of why these movies work or don't work in the long run. The twist, or the reveal, or the motive of the killers, whatever you want to call it, may not be as much of an eye roller as Scream 5's was, but it's easily the most underwhelming and forgettable finale in the franchise.
How can you not care?
like this.
In fact, it plays out like a cheap imitation of the Scream 2 finale. Only this time we're connecting things back to the characters in Scream 5. Not to mention the reveal did also feel pretty forced, and not as clever as the writers thought it would be. These new Scream movies are supposed to be pushing the franchise in new and exciting directions. But like most legacy horror lately, it feels like it's failing at doing that. And it just ends up rehashing old ideas and trying to pass them off as their own.
Why do these things always happen to me?
But if you're watching this movie without fan goggles on, you know better. To me, Scream 6 is the equivalent of having a heavyweight fighter talk a lot of crap before his fight and then get knocked out in the first round. All talk, no action, all slash, no substance. To me, Scream was always about innovation and challenging the status quo of the genre. Scream 6 feels like it's doing the bare minimum, and thus this movie feels like the first bit of filler in this franchise's history. There's nothing smart or exciting about this movie once you get past all the blood and gore. And for that reason, I have to believe that Wes Craven himself is rolling over in his grave over what these people have done to his iconic creation. They turned it into a shell of its former self. It's completely devoid of any of the natural charm that originally made these movies stand out. I went into this movie with the lowest of expectations, and somehow I still managed to find myself being disappointed. In fact, this may very well be the first time since The Last Jedi that I was actually left speechless by what I was watching. I've seen a lot of people say that Scream has become a parody of itself at this point, and is now basically everything that this franchise used to poke fun at, and honestly, I couldn't agree more. Combine that with the fact that they are blatantly disrespecting legacy characters, and simultaneously insulting the intelligence of Scream fans and horror fans everywhere, all in an effort to deconstruct what Wes Craven built just to make the franchise more appealing to a younger generation. A generation that now doesn't have a clear understanding of what these movies could and should be. All of this is a recipe for disaster. I was hard pressed to find anything about this movie that I enjoyed, outside of maybe the opening sequence, and that's upsetting to think about as a longtime Scream fan. You can very clearly tell that this movie was made in 1 year, because the writing and the production reflects that. Everything about it feels rushed, the writing was on the wall after Scream 5, but honestly, nothing could have prepared me for what I just watched. And that's why I'm going to give Scream 6 the Disgusted Ian Malcolm.
That is one big pile of shit.
Y'all be cool. Right on.